All right, so far we've learned how to find the slope from looking at a graph, from 2 points on a graph. So now we're going to find out, how do you find the slope from 2 points without a graph? What if I just give you two ordered pairs? Can you find the slope between them? Can you find out how much the graph is going to change from one point to the next? So sometimes we're not given a graph, but instead we're given 2 points on the line. When this is the case, we must implement another definition of slope. The slope of a line containing 2 points, so you've got 2 points, x1, y1, so the x and y from the first point, x2, y2, which is the x and y from the second point, can be found using the formula below. So you're going to go ahead and pause the video if you need to, write this formula down. It's very important. This is the formula we're going to use to find the slope from 2 points. Now, once you've wrote that down, here's what that means. M is the slope. So the slope is going to equal what you're going to do. You're going to take the y from the second point and subtract the y from the first point over, subtract the x from the, take the x from the second point and subtract the x from the first point. So basically you're finding how is y changing, and you're dividing it by how is your x changing, which is going to make a lot more sense when we look at an example. So find the slope find the slope of the line that would have these 2 points. So let me grab my pen. All right, so we take the y from the second point. So here's our 2 points. So here's our first point. So we would say, okay, well then that's the x1 because that's the x from the first point, and that would be our y1 because that's the y from the first point, which means this would be our x2. It's our y from our second point, y2, our y from our third point. Our y from our second point. All right, so real simple. Formula says take your second y minus your first y. So the y from the second point is 3 minus, what's the y in our first point? It's 1. So 3 minus 1 over, take the x from the second point. So here's our second point. Take the x, which is 2, minus our x from our first point. Our x from our first point is -4, so minus a -4. And then anytime you have two signs here, I would go ahead and combine them. You have 2 minus a -4, but the easiest thing to do is to look at those and just say, okay, two negatives. Two negatives make a what? Two negatives make a positive, so that's really just 2 plus 4. So what's our slope equal? 3 minus 1 is 2 over 2 plus 4 is 6, and then we always simplify. So 2/6 simplifies into 1/3. All right, you always need to simplify. So how do you find the slope from 2 points? You just take the second x and you subtract the first x. Take the second y, subtract the first y, put that on top. Ooh, I'm misspeaking a lot in this. Take the second x, subtract the first x. So let's look at some more examples if my fumbling around messed you up a little bit on that one. So let's see. Okay, so before we start finding some more slopes and practicing, let's take a look at what if you got these answers. Let's say you did your y2 minus your y1, got that number, took your x2 minus your x1, got that number, and then you ended up with these. So real quick, you don't have to write them down. You can just look at them and go through each one and just figure out what would you get if you reduced it. If you simplified them, what would you get? So go ahead and just pause the video, look at those, and decide, if I simplified these, what would my answer be? And then we'll look at it together. So hopefully by now you've paused the video, you've finished these, you've looked at each one. So let's take a look. -3 over 9. You have a positive and a negative, makes it negative. 3 over 9 would be 1/3. 4 over negative 7. Positive and negative make a negative. Can I simplify 4 over 7? No, so it just stays negative 4 over 7. All right, look at this one. Positive and a positive makes a positive. 4 over 10. I can divide each of those by 2, which would give me 2/5. 1 over negative 8. Positive and a negative give me a negative. Can't simplify 1 over 8, so it's just negative 1 over 8. 4 over 1. 4 divided by 1 gives us 4. 0 over 12. 0 divided by 12 gives us 0. Positive and a negative make a negative. 7 divided by 1 is 7. 0 divided by negative 2. When we look at that, really isn't. You don't need to look at the signs because 0 is not positive or negative. You just need to solve it. 0 divided by negative 2 is 0. So it's not positive or negative. It's just plain 0. Don't look at this and go positive and then negative is a negative. 0 divided by 2 is 0. Never write negative 0. It's just plain 0. 2 negatives make a positive. 2 divided by 3 stays the same. So it's just positive 2/3. 12 divided by 0. If you do anything divided by 0, you'll get an error. So that means it is undefined. I'm not going to have room to write that all in there, but undefined. So remember, your slope would be undefined. So if the slope's undefined, what kind of line does that make? That would be a vertical line. All right, 2 negatives make a positive. Can't simplify 1 over 8, so it stays the same. And then negative 2 divided by 0. Anything divided by 0 is undefined. So you just write out undefined. All right. So good. Hopefully you got all those right. Because if you type in the original answers, you would miss it. You need to change it, either reduce them or fix the signs or change it to undefined if it's undefined or 0. So let's keep looking. Let's go down here and let's look at these together. I'm going to do the top ones, and then I'm going to have you do the bottom ones on your own to make sure you've got this. So remember, our equation, well, not really our equation, but our formula, you take the second y and you subtract the first y. So take the y from the second problem minus the y from the first problem. And then you put that over top of, you take your x from your second point and you minus your x from your first point. So if we look at our first example here, take our second y minus our first y. So we've got 2 minus, so take our second y, so 2 minus, and then our first y, negative 1. Be very careful because a lot of people would look at this and they would just go 2 minus 1, and they would just write 2 minus 1, and then they would miss it. So you got to make sure that you take your y, put that down, 2, put your minus, and then whatever this is, put it right there. All right, then we take our second x minus our first x, which is 6 minus 4. So what is our slope? 2 negatives make a positive. 2 plus 1 is 3 over 6 minus 4 is 2. Can't simplify it. You could change it to a mixed number, but we never write slope as mixed number. Always leave it as an improper fraction. So 3 over 2 stays 3 over 2. So m is equal to 3 over 2. All right, let's look at our next one. Take our second y minus our first y. So we have 3 minus, and what's our first y? Negative 2 over, take our second x minus our first x, 4 minus 3. Now, a place where a lot of students make mistakes, they'll look at it and they'll get 3 minus negative 2, they'll get 4 minus 3, but they'll have it flip-flop and they'll have the x's on top and the y's on the bottom. You got to be very careful that your y, how your y changes always has to be It always has to be on the top because remember, slope is rise over run. It's your rise over run. How is it changing vertically? So that's your y over top of how is it changing horizontally, which is your x. Negative and negative make a positive. 3 plus 2 is 5 over 4 minus 3 is 1. So then we would simplify that to our slope is just 5. Take a look at this one. Y minus y. So our second y is 12 minus our first y is 4 over top of negative 3 minus 0. So our second x is negative 3 minus our first x is 0. So if we go over here, 12 minus 4 is 8 over negative 3 minus 0 is negative 3. So then our answer is just negative 8 over 3. Positive and negative make a negative. Can't simplify 8 over 3, so it just stays 8 over 3. So I want you to pause the video and work on these three. Look at them, figure out what the answer would be, write it down, and then we'll check to see if you get it right. So go ahead, pause the video. Hopefully you've paused it and you've done these problems by now. So let's take a look at what the answer would be. Second y minus the first y, 1 minus 7 over second y minus our second x minus the first x, negative 3. Oh, it's going to be a tricky one. So you have negative 3 minus negative 1. So we have 1 minus 7 and then negative 3 minus negative 1. So two negatives make a positive. Negative 1 minus 7. So if you're at 1 and you go down 7, you'll be at negative 6. If I would always, when you're dealing with integers and positive and negative numbers, I would always check my answer in the calculator just to make sure you did that correctly. Negative 3 plus 1. If you're at negative 3 and you go up 1, you'll be at negative 2. Be careful with those. Make sure that's what you got. If you're at negative 3 and you go up 1, you're at negative 2. Two negatives make a positive. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So our slope, to get from this point to this point on a graph, you would just go up 3. And then if the slope's 3, that would be like 3 over 1. So up 3 over 1. So our slope is 3. All right, hopefully you got that one right. Let's check this one. Our second y minus our first y, and then our second x, negative 11, minus our first x, which is 3. So 7 minus 7 is 0 over 11 minus 3. If you're at negative 11 and go down 3, you'll be at negative 14. Simplify that. 0 divided by anything is 0. And then our last one, take our y2 minus y1. So our second y is 10 minus the y from our first point, which is 4, over top of our x from our second point minus our x from our first point. So negative 5 minus negative 5. Make sure you wrote that correctly. We have negative 5, and then you subtract your first one, which is negative 5. Two negatives make a positive. 10 minus 4 is 6 over 5. And then so you have negative 5 plus 5. So if you're at negative 5 and you go up 5, you're at 0. And then remember, anytime you're dividing by 0, anything divided by 0 is an error in the calculator. So then that would be, you would write undefined. Undefined. All right, so pretty simple. Finding the slope from 2 points. Take a look. I think this is going to be the end of our examples. Yep, coming over here, we have some more, but I think y'all got this. We don't need to do these. If you get stuck, You can look back at these. These show all the different types that you'll get. So you've got these to look at. If we go and look at your IXL assignment you'll have, it's pretty simple. It's going to be Algebra 1, S4. Find the slope from 2 points. And all it does is right here, find the slope of the line that passes through, and it gives you your 2 points. So you would just look at them, and the easiest thing, just your second y minus your first y. 15 minus 6. All right, so that gives you 9 over, and then your second x minus your first x. 5 minus 7 is -2. So -2, but then is that how we would write that? No, you would say a positive and a negative is a negative, and you would just put your negative out in the front. All right, can I simplify 9 and 2? No, I can't. It's an improper fraction. We leave it as an improper fraction. So if you have any questions, let me know. Email me. We've got Google Meets coming up if you want to talk about these on a Google Meet. Anything you need, I'm here. So let me know. All right.